I was reorganizing the kitchen drawers when I found the box. You know the one. Filled with tangled cords, dead remotes, and that one ancient charger nobody throws out just in case. At the bottom, half buried under a nest of oak cable, was my old phone. It had that faded plastic smell. I wiped it off with my sleeve, pressed the power button on instinct. Nothing. I plugged it into the wall, and to my surprise, the screen lit up, slowly, like it was waking from a coma. I didn't even remember the passcode at first, but my fingers did. Muscle memory. The phone unlocked, and suddenly I was staring into a digital time capsule. Old photos, random notes, a half-finished grocery list, and a voicemail notification. I tapped on it. Hey, it's Jared. I've been thinking about those days. I miss them. I miss us, I guess. Hope you're okay? That was it. No timestamp. Just his voice. Warm, low, careful. I hadn't heard it in years. The last time we talked, I think it was over Slack. Nothing personal. Work-related. Just a few lines and a goodbye. And yet, hearing him now, it pulled something loose in me. Something soft. I didn't know it was still there. In the background, Andrew was on a Zoom call in the living room, pacing like he always does when he's trying to land a point. I heard him say something about quarterly reports, then laugh politely at a joke I knew he didn't find funny. I stood in the kitchen, holding the old phone, listening to that voicemail again. Not because I needed to hear the words, but because of the way he said them. I don't even know what it was. Nostalgia, curiosity, guilt? Maybe all three. That night, I didn't mention it to Andrew. He made us pasta, poured me a glass of wine. We sat across from each other like we always did. He talked about the upcoming company retreat, about how they were renting a yacht this year. I nodded in all the right places, but my mind wasn't really there. It was back in that office in Chicago 5 years ago, when Jared and I used to grab lunch at that falafel truck by the park. He had this way of asking about your day like he actually cared. I forgot how rare that was. The old phone stayed on the kitchen counter for days. I didn't charge it again, but I didn't throw it away either. Funny how something that doesn't even work anymore can still make everything feel unstable. The yacht was bigger than I expected, all polished wood and chrome railings, docked along the marina like it belonged, to someone who'd forgotten how normal people live. The invitation said casual cocktail attire, but there wasn't a single casual thing about the crowd that night. Men in navy sport coats that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage, women with perfect hair that didn't move even when the breeze picked up off the water. Everyone looked like they'd just stepped out of a LinkedIn ad campaign. Stayed near the lower deck bar for a while, swirling the same drink I barely touched, pretending to be fascinated by the city skyline as it drifted past us. Andrew was upstairs, caught in some animated conversation with his team lead, and a woman who laughed too loudly at everything he said. I didn't mind being alone. I'd gotten used to it in rooms full of people. But there was something about being on that boat that made the silence feel heavier than usual, like I was sitting in the quiet part of a movie where you know something is about to change. Eventually, I went up to the top deck, telling myself I needed air even though the breeze had already left my arms cold. That's when I ran into Vince, one of Andrew's colleagues I'd met maybe twice before. He was the kind of man who always seemed to know when someone felt out of place, and he made a point of acting like he was doing you a favor by talking to you, as if his attention was a gift you hadn't asked for but were somehow expected to appreciate anyway. We talked for a few minutes, harmless small talk about the view, about how these kinds of events were always the same, but the way he looked at me was anything but harmless. It wasn't overtly inappropriate. It was worse than that. It was familiar, too familiar, like he'd already decided something about me and was just waiting for me to catch up. At one point, I turned slightly, pretending to check my phone, and caught Andrew watching us from the other side of the deck. His face didn't move, not even a flicker, but he saw it. He saw everything. The way Vince leaned in a little too close, the way I didn't immediately pull back, the way our conversation lasted a bit longer than it needed to. Later, on the ride home, Andrew didn't bring it up. He just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely on his knee, eyes fixed on the road like it was holding all the answers he didn't want to ask for. I thought about saying something light, maybe sarcastic, just enough to clear the air. But nothing came out. Instead, I sat there, staring out the window at the water flashing silver in the moonlight, thinking about how quickly a moment can shift from innocent to something else, even when no lines are crossed, or maybe especially when they're not. It was one of those warm weekday afternoons that make the city feel like it's on pause. Traffic lighter than usual, conversations slower, like everyone agreed to give themselves a break. I met up with Liv at this little taco place we both liked, the kind with hand-painted menus and a patio where the tables wobbled just enough to be annoying but not enough to complain about. She was already there when I arrived, sipping iced tea through a paper straw and scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone with that restless energy she always carried, like she was waiting for someone to say something real. We ordered, sat back, and did the usual dance of catching up. Her work, my work, some new yoga class she tried and hated, something about her boyfriend being moody again, the usual surface-level chatter that used to feel like enough but didn't anymore. I don't remember how we landed on the topic. Maybe I brought it up without meaning to. But somehow we were talking about masks people wear, how well they learn to disguise the cracks in their lives until even they forget what's real. Underneath, she was saying something about her ex, about how he used to lie by omission, not with words but with silence. And I just blurted it out, halfway through a bite of carne asada. There was this weird moment with Vince on the yacht, I said, barely looking up, trying to make it sound like it didn't matter, even though it clearly did. Liv didn't flinch. She never does. She just leaned back in her chair, narrowed her eyes slightly the way she does when she's sorting truth from avoidance, and said, without hesitation, "It's never just a moment. It's the beginning of something, even if you're not ready to call it that." I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at the condensation on my glass and let her words sit there between us. She wasn't judging me. That wasn't her way. But she wasn't offering comfort either. She was holding up a mirror, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to look. "I didn't do anything," I said finally, quieter than I meant to. "I know," she said. "But that's not really the point, is it?" And just like that, the whole mood shifted, not in a dramatic way, but in the way you suddenly realize the air's gotten cooler or the sun's moved behind a cloud. We finished our lunch, changed the subject, walked down the street to a bookstore like nothing had happened, but the conversation stayed with me. Not like guilt, not exactly, but more like the awareness that something had been named, and once something's been named, it can't be unnamed. Later that night, lying in bed next to Andrew while he scrolled through emails, and I pretended to read, I thought about Liv's words again, how she didn't say it like a warning, but like a truth she wished someone had told her sooner. And the thing is, I didn't feel tempted or confused. I just felt exposed, like a door had been cracked open inside me, not wide enough for anyone to step through, but enough for the light to start leaking in. Austin looked the same as I remembered it. Too many murals trying too hard to be authentic, food trucks on every corner selling fusion something, and that heavy, almost sticky warmth in the air that made you feel like the sky was leaning in, a little too close. And while Andrew handled back-to-back meetings with people who spoke in acronyms and laughed at things that weren't jokes, I stayed mostly in the hotel room, working through emails, watching bad TV on mute, trying not to count the hours. By the third evening, I didn't bother pretending to be part of the trip anymore. I ordered room service, stretched out on the bed with my laptop, and told Andrew I wasn't up for another steakhouse dinner with men who only addressed me when asking if I needed a refill. He left with a relieved kind of politeness, said he'd text when they wrapped up, and I stayed behind in the quiet. Not lonely, exactly, but not entirely alone either. Because when I checked my phone out of habit, there it was, a message from Jared. He said he was in town too, for a few days. Not far from where we were staying, and if I had time, he'd love to catch up. No pressure, just a coffee, if that was something I'd want. I didn't answer right away. I watched the message sit there on the screen, as if it might decide for me if I stared long enough, but eventually I typed back something simple, something non-committal and easy to take back. And within the hour, I was walking to a quiet little cafe 2 blocks away, my heart not racing, not exactly, but definitely out of rhythm. He was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with a view of the street, wearing a worn denim jacket over a gray t-shirt that hadn't changed much from how I remembered him. A little older, maybe, but still holding himself like someone who wasn't in a rush to be anywhere else. The moment he saw me, he stood up, smiled in that calm, unreadable way he always had, and for a second, it was like we'd never stopped talking, like we were just picking up a thread we'd dropped somewhere and found again without meaning to. We talked for a long time, not about anything dramatic or even especially significant, but about life, work, cities we'd lived in since, people we'd lost touch with, and I found myself laughing in that quiet, surprised way that only happens when you didn't realize how much you needed to feel like yourself again. There was no flirtation, no tension, no drama, just the steady warmth of 2 people who had once mattered to each other and still, somehow, carried a soft place for that version of themselves. But when we stood up to leave, when we stepped, outside and the night air folded around us like a pause between sentences, he looked at me, not searching, not asking, just looking, and then he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't rushed or uncertain, and it didn't ask anything of me. It wasn't a kiss born of longing or regret. It was quiet, almost careful. And there was something about the way he stepped back afterward, as if he already knew what it meant for both of us, that left me standing there with my hands still at my sides, not moving, not answering, not regretting, not yet. When I got back to the room, Andrew was already asleep, the covers half kicked off, the TV casting light across his face like he was somewhere far from me even in sleep. I slipped under the sheets, stared at the ceiling for a long time, and didn't touch my phone. Sunday brunch with Andrew's coworkers and their families was never really about food or conversation, and although the restaurant had that kind of forced charm, exposed brick, endless mimosas, little jars of overpriced jam, it was clear from the moment we walked in that the real purpose was something unspoken, something closer to performance, a kind of quiet measuring where everyone smiled too much and said too little, and no one asked a question they didn't already know the answer to. I wore a soft blue dress I hadn't worn in months, not because I loved it or felt particularly confident in it, but because it was the sort of thing that made people say I looked well-rested, even when I wasn't sleeping much. And as we sat down at a long corner table surrounded by soft jazz and clinking glasses, I caught myself rehearsing my expressions like I used to do before job interviews, the muscle memory of playing agreeable slipping back on too easily. Andrew was talking to his boss's husband about something financial, a merger maybe, or interest rates, or some other language that felt like filler to me. And I was nodding along at the edge of a conversation I wasn't part of, when one of the women, elegant in that practiced, timeless way that makes you wonder how long she's been managing appearances, leaned over with her champagne glass half raised and said something in a tone so casual I almost missed the weight behind it. "Sometimes," she said, with a knowing smile and a voice that didn't quite match the expression on her face, "we all pretend everything's fine, because saying it out loud doesn't actually change anything. It just makes it harder to sit through brunch. I looked at her, not sure what she was referring to, whether she'd seen something, heard something, or simply recognized something familiar in the way I held myself. But before I could respond, she winked at me like we were sharing a secret I didn't know I'd told, and turned back to the group, her hand already reaching for another croissant. For the rest of the meal, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. Not because of what she said exactly, but because of how true it felt. How quickly it settled into the part of my mind where I'd been filing away all the things I hadn't been ready to say out loud. I watched her across the table, laughing at something forgettable, her wedding ring catching the light, and it hit me that none of these women were naive. They were architects of quiet survival, fluent in the language of compromise, and underneath, all the silk blouses and strategic smiles was the shared knowledge that sometimes pretending wasn't a failure of courage, but a necessary kind of resilience. When we got home, I didn't mention what she'd said to Andrew, not because I was hiding anything, but because I wasn't sure he would understand what I was trying to say, or worse, he would understand too well and not know how to respond. And that silence, small and subtle, joined the others we'd been collecting without realizing it, forming a quiet rhythm we both seemed to recognize but never addressed. That night, as I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Not the way I looked, but the way I was looking at myself. And I realized something that felt both new and familiar. I wasn't waiting for anything to fall apart, but I also wasn't convinced anything was truly holding together. The living room smelled faintly, of chamomile from the tea steeping in mismatched mugs on the coffee table. Liv sat cross-legged on the couch, her hair thrown into a messy bun, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her duffel bag slumped against the wall near the door, a silent reminder of the fight that had sent her here. I'd offered her the guest room without a second thought when she texted me last night. Her words clipped. "Can I crash at your place? Just for a bit." Now, with the TV humming low in the background, some cooking show neither of us was watching, the air felt heavy, like it was waiting for one of us to say something real. I curled my fingers around my mug, the warmth grounding me as I tried to figure out where to start. Liv beat me to it. "So, you gonna tell me what's going on with you? Or are we just gonna sip tea and pretend everything's fine?" Her voice was gentle but pointed, the kind of tone that didn't let you wiggle out of the truth. I laughed, more out of nerves than humor, and set my mug down. "You're the one who just left your boyfriend's place. Maybe you should go first." She shrugged, her eyes flicking to the ceiling. "Fair. It's the same old mess. He thinks I'm too much, I think he's not enough, and we both know it's not going anywhere. I just needed space." She paused, her gaze settling on me. "Your turn." I shifted, tucking my legs under me. The words felt stuck, like they were tangled up somewhere between my chest and my throat. I hadn't planned to tell her about Jared, about that night in Austin. But sitting here, with her looking at me, like she already knew I was hiding something, I couldn't keep it in. "I saw Jared," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "In Austin. We met up for coffee and he kissed me." Liv's eyebrows shot up, but she didn't say anything right away. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, like she was bracing for the rest of the story. "Okay, and?" "And nothing," I said too quickly. It wasn't some big romantic thing. It was, I don't know, like he needed to do it to close a chapter or something. But it happened, and now I can't stop thinking about it. She tilted her head, studying me. "You're not telling me this because it was just a kiss. You're telling me because it meant something. To you." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. Instead, I felt a pang, sharp and inconvenient, right under my ribs. "It's not like I'm in love with him," I said finally. "It's just, it reminded me of a time when things felt simpler. When I felt like I knew who I was. Liv nodded, slow, like she was piecing something together. You know what's funny? We always think the past was better because we survived it, but you're not that person anymore, and neither is he. She took a sip of her tea, then set it down with a soft clink. So what's the deal with you and Andrew? You're not just sitting here freaking out over a kiss because it was nostalgic. I looked down at my hands, at the faint tan line where my wedding ring sat. Things with Andrew are fine. He's been good. Too good, maybe. Like he's trying to make up for something I haven't even accused him of. I hesitated, then let it spill. He saw me talking to Vince at that yacht party. I don't think he trusts me anymore. Or maybe I don't trust myself. Liv let out a low whistle. Damn, you've got a whole soap opera going on. She leaned back, her expression softening. Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will say this. You can't keep pretending nothing's changed. That kiss? It's not just a kiss. It's a crack in the foundation. And if you don't deal with it, it's going to spread. I swallowed, her words landing heavier than I wanted them to. What am I supposed to do? Tell Andrew? Ignore it? Act like it never happened? She gave me a look that was equal parts sympathy and tough love. You're asking me to fix something only you can figure out. But whatever you choose, don't lie to yourself. That's the worst kind of betrayal. The room went quiet, save for the faint chatter of the TV. I wanted to argue, to say she was wrong, that I could shove this all back into a box and move on. But the truth was, I couldn't. That kiss had shifted something, not just between me and D. Jared, but inside me. It was like a door I'd thought was locked had creaked open, and now I couldn't stop wondering what was on the other side. Liv reached over, squeezing my hand. You're not alone in this, okay? But you've got to be honest with yourself, first. Figure out what you want. Not what D. Jared wants. Not what Andrew expects. You. I nodded, but it felt hollow. The weight of her words stayed with me long after she'd gone to bed, leaving me alone in the living room with the tea gone. Cold, and a question I wasn't ready to answer. What did I want? And was I brave enough to find out? The kitchen was quiet, save for the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional clink of dishes as I loaded the dishwasher. Andrew stood by the counter, his tie loosened, a faint smile playing on his lips as he held out a small velvet box. Got you something, he said, his voice casual, like he was offering me a cup of coffee. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, my stomach doing a weird flip. What's this? I asked, taking the box. It was light, the kind of thing that screamed jewelry before you even opened it. Just open it, he said, leaning against the counter, watching me. Inside was a delicate silver pendant, a tiny crescent moon with a single sapphire set in it. It was beautiful, understated, the kind of thing I'd have picked out myself. But the timing felt off, like a song played in the wrong key. Andrew, this is gorgeous, I said, forcing a smile. But what's the occasion? He shrugged, his eyes not quite meeting mine. No occasion. I saw it. Thought of you. That's all. I nodded, slipping the pendant back into the box, my fingers lingering on the velvet. Thank you, I said, but the words felt thin. I wanted to ask, why? Why now? Why this? But the question stuck in my throat. Instead, I hugged him, his arms warm but somehow distant, like he was holding me from a step away. Later, alone in our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, the box still in my hand. The pendant gleamed under the lamp, but it wasn't what held my attention. My gaze drifted to the small wooden jewelry box on my dresser, the one I hadn't opened in weeks. I knew what was inside, tucked beneath a tangle of old necklaces, a folded piece of paper, creased from time, with D. Jared's handwriting scrawled across it. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. but my fingers moved before my brain caught. Up, lifting the lid, digging through the clutter until I found it. The note was simple, written on a torn piece of notebook paper. You stayed with me, even if we're not together. I'd found it in my coat pocket years ago after we'd stopped talking. I'd kept it, not because I was pining, but because it felt like a piece of who I used to be. Someone bolder, someone who didn't second-guess every choice. Now, holding it, I felt a twist in my chest, sharp and unwelcome. The note was a ghost, a reminder of a life I hadn't chosen. And the pendant? It was Andrew's attempt to anchor me to the life I had. But both felt heavy, like they were pulling me in opposite directions. I tucked the note back into the box, closing the lid with a soft click. The pendant stayed on the dresser, unopened. I didn't wear it that night, or the next. I told myself it was because I didn't want to lose it, but deep down, I knew the truth. Putting it on felt like making a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. The next morning, Andrew was up early, already on a call when I came downstairs. He glanced at me, his smile quick but distracted. "You like the necklace?" he asked, covering the phone's mic. "Yeah," I said, pouring coffee. "It's perfect." The lie slipped out easily, but it left a bitter taste. He nodded, turning, back to his call, and I stood there, gripping my mug, wondering when we'd started tiptoeing around each other. That afternoon, I went for a walk, the air crisp with the promise of fall. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Liv. "You okay? Haven't heard from you." I typed a quick reply saying I was fine, but I didn't hit send. Instead, I kept walking, the pendant and the note still circling in my mind. Liv's words from the other night echoed, "Don't lie to yourself." But what was the truth? That I was unraveling? That a gift from my husband felt like a question I couldn't answer? When I got home, Andrew was in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table. He looked up, his expression softer than it had been in days. "You didn't wear the necklace," he said, not accusing, just noticing. I froze, caught off guard. "I didn't want to wear it while I was out," I said, the excuse flimsy even to my ears. "It's too nice for a walk." He nodded, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or resignation. "Sure," he said, turning back to his work. The moment passed, but it left a crack, small but undeniable, in the quiet between us. That night, I lay awake, Andrew's steady, breathing filling the room. The jewelry box sat on the dresser, a silent challenge. I could wear the pendant tomorrow, tell myself it was just a necklace, not a symbol of anything. I could throw out the note, let D. Jared's words fade into the past where they belonged. But as I stared at the ceiling, I knew I wouldn't do either. Not yet. Because choosing meant admitting what I wanted, and I was nowhere near ready for that. The Arizona sun was relentless, bleaching the landscape until it looked like a painting left out too long. Our motel was a low-slung building off the highway, its neon sign flickering even in daylight. Andrew had booked it for a quick getaway, a chance to reset, he'd said, though neither of us mentioned what we were resetting from. The room smelled faintly of old carpet and bleach, but it was clean enough, with a view of the desert stretching out like an endless question. We'd driven most of the day, the car filled with small talk about gas stations and playlists. Anything, to avoid the weight of what wasn't being said. Andrew was trying. Too hard, maybe. He'd crack jokes, reach for my hand at stoplights, but his smiles didn't reach his eyes. I played along, nodding, laughing when I was supposed to, but my mind kept drifting back to the pendant, still unworn, and the note I hadn't thrown away. That evening, Andrew went to grab takeout from a diner down the road. "Burgers sound good?" he asked, keys jingling in his hand. "Yeah, perfect," I said, forcing a smile. He nodded and left, the door clicking shut behind him. The room felt too big without him, the silence pressing in like a guest I hadn't invited. I kicked off. My shoes, sprawled on the bed, and stared at the popcorn ceiling, trying to shake the restlessness that had followed me from home. Then I saw it. A small white envelope on the floor, half tucked under the door. My stomach twisted as I got up, my bare feet cold against the tile. I picked it up, the paper cheap but crisp, like it had been slipped there minutes ago. No name, no address, just a few words scrawled in black ink. I'm nearby. If you want, just open. My breath caught. I knew that handwriting. D. Jared. It wasn't possible, not here, not now, but there it was, undeniable. I turned the envelope over, half expecting an explanation, but there was nothing else. Just those words, simple and loaded, like a dare. I stood by the door, my hand hovering over the knob. The metal was cool under my fingers, the silence on the other side so thick it felt alive. I pictured him out there, maybe leaning against the wall, waiting. What would I say if I opened it? What did I even want? The kiss in Austin flashed through my mind, not heated, not desperate, but deliberate, like he'd meant it with every piece of himself. It had undone something in me, and I hated how much I still felt it. But I didn't open the door. I couldn't. Not because of Andrew or the pendant, or even the note still buried in my jewelry box. I didn't open it because I was afraid of what I'd do if I saw him. Afraid of how easy it would be to step across that line, to let the past swallow me whole. I backed away, the envelope still in my hand, and sank onto the bed. My heart was pounding, but my mind was eerily calm, like I'd dodged something I wasn't ready to face. I slipped the envelope into my bag, out of sight, though its weight lingered in my fingers. The room stayed quiet, the desert outside indifferent, to the choice I'd just made. When Andrew came back, he was carrying a greasy paper bag, the smell of fries filling the room. "Got you extra ketchup," he said, setting everything on the small table by the window. His voice was light, but his eyes flicked to me, searching for something I wasn't sure I could give. "Thanks," I said, forcing myself to move, to sit across from him like nothing had happened. We ate in near silence, the crunch of fries, and the hum of the AC the only sounds. He didn't ask why I was quiet, and I didn't offer, but I felt it, the gap between us, wider than it had been that morning. Later, after he'd fallen asleep, I lay awake, the envelope's words looping in my head. "If you want, just open." I hadn't opened the door, but I hadn't thrown the note away either. It was still there, in my bag, a secret I was choosing to keep. And that choice, small as it was, felt like a step toward something I couldn't name. The desert night was still, the motel's neon sign casting faint shadows through the curtains. I listened to Andrew's breathing, steady and unaware, and wondered how long I could keep standing at this threshold, one foot in my life, the other, reaching for something else. The envelope was silent, but it was louder than anything else in the room. The email came on a Tuesday morning, tucked between spam and a reminder about a dentist appointment. Subject: organizational changes. I knew what it was before I opened it. The words were polite, sterile. Regret to inform you. Workforce reduction. Effective immediately. My desk felt too small, the office too quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. I'd been expecting it. Rumors had been circling. For weeks, but expecting something doesn't make it hurt less. I packed my things in a cardboard box, the kind you'd use for moving, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. It felt like walking out of a movie halfway through. By afternoon, I was home, the box on the kitchen counter, my laptop closed. Andrew was at work, the house empty except for the hum of the fridge. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling like someone had pulled the plug on my life. My phone buzzed, a text from D. Jared. "Heard about the layoffs. You okay? Want to grab coffee? I can help with next steps. I hadn't heard from him since Arizona, since that envelope I still hadn't thrown out. I shouldn't have replied, but my fingers moved anyway. Sure. When? We met at a coffee shop downtown, one of those places with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. I got there first, claiming a corner table, my hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. When D. Jared walked in, he wasn't alone. A kid, maybe 6, trailed behind him, clutching a toy car. My nephew, Max, D. Jared said, ruffling the boy's hair as they sat down. I'm babysitting today. Max grinned, already distracted, by his car, zooming it across the table. I smiled, the tension in my chest easing a fraction. Didn't know you were the uncle type, I said. There's a lot you don't know, D. Jared teased, but his eyes were soft, careful, like he was measuring the space between us. So, the job. What happened? I shrugged, picking at the edge of my napkin. They called it restructuring. I call it getting screwed. I'll figure it out, but it sucks. He nodded, leaning back. It does, but you're good at what you do. I know people if you want me to make calls. Or I can look at your resume. I glanced at Max, who was now making engine noises, oblivious to us. Thanks, I said. I might take you up on that. But the job wasn't what I wanted to talk about, and he knew it. The air felt charged, like we were both waiting for the other to bring up Austin, or the envelope, or something heavier. Instead, we talked about nothing. His nephew's obsession with cars, my failed attempt at baking bread, the kind of small talk that fills gaps. Max interrupted to show me his toy, and I laughed, genuinely for the first time that day. Watching D. Jared with him, patient and easy, I saw a side of him I hadn't before. He wasn't the guy from my memories anymore, the one who'd kissed me in a moment of reckless clarity. He was here now, with a kid who adored him, with a life that had moved on. You're different, I said, almost without meaning to. He raised an eyebrow, stirring his coffee. Good different or bad different? Just different. I hesitated, then pushed forward. You seem settled, like you've got things figured out. He laughed, low and a little bitter. Nobody's got it figured out. I'm just trying to keep up. His eyes met mine, and for a second, I saw the old D. Jared, the one who'd written that note, who'd stood outside my motel door. But then Max tugged at his sleeve, and the moment broke. We didn't talk about the kiss. We didn't need to. It hung there, a quiet truth we both understood. When we said goodbye, he hugged me. Quick, friendly, nothing more. Max waved, and I waved back, watching them walk away, the toy car still in the kid's hand. Driving home, I felt lighter, but not relieved. D. Jared wasn't my answer, and he never had been. The kiss, the note, the envelope, they were echoes, not directions. I'd been holding on to them like they could tell me who I was, but sitting in that coffee shop, watching him with Max, I'd seen it clearly. We weren't those people anymore. The past was just a story we'd both outgrown. When I got home, Andrew was in the living room, his laptop open. How's the job hunt? He asked, glancing up. Early stages, I said, setting my bag down. The envelope was still inside, but it felt less heavy now, like it was losing its power. I'll figure it out, he nodded, his expression unreadable. You always do. I wanted to tell him about the coffee shop, about D. Jared and Max, about the strange clarity I'd found. But I didn't. Not because I was hiding it, but because it felt like mine to carry, at least for now. The layoff had taken something from me, but it had also given me a chance to see what I'd been clinging to, and what I needed to let go. The restaurant was loud, packed with the kind of cheerful chaos that comes with family birthdays. Andrew's brother Tom was turning 35. And the whole clan had shown up. Cousins, aunts, even a great uncle who kept telling the same fishing story. We were squeezed into a long table, plates of pasta and garlic bread piling up, wine glasses clinking. I was nursing a soda, trying to keep up with the overlapping conversations, when I realized who was sitting across from me. Vince. He hadn't been at the yacht party since that night, but there he was, in a crisp button-down, his smile too sharp, like he'd been waiting for this. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, leaning forward so his voice cut through the noise. "You're looking good." I forced a polite nod, my stomach tightening. "Thanks. Just here for Tom." I glanced at Andrew, who was deep in a debate with his cousin about baseball stats, oblivious to us. Vince's attention felt like a spotlight, too bright and too focused. "Tom's lucky to have you guys show up," Vince said, his tone casual but his eyes lingering. "You ever get tired of these family things? I bet you'd rather be somewhere quieter, just you and a good drink." The comment was innocent. Enough on the surface, but the way he said it, low, like a secret, made my skin prickle. I shifted in my seat, picking up my glass to have something to do with my hands. "I'm good here," I said, keeping my voice even. "Family's nice sometimes." He smirked, like he didn't quite buy it, and leaned back, sipping his wine. The conversation moved on. Someone asked him about his new project at work, and he launched into a story about deadlines and clients. But every so often, his gaze flicked back to me, a silent nudge that said he hadn't forgotten that moment on the yacht, and he knew I hadn't either. I tried to focus on the party. Tom was laughing, his wife cutting the cake, kids running around, with balloons. Andrew reached for my hand under the table, his thumb brushing my knuckles, and I squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. But Vince's presence was a low hum in the background, unsettling, like a song you can't quite place. When dinner wrapped up, we spilled into the parking lot, saying goodbyes under the streetlights. Vince lingered, chatting with Tom, but I caught him watching me as I helped Andrew load a gift bag into the car. I ignored it, or tried to, but the weight of his stare followed me like a shadow. The drive home was quiet, the radio playing some soft rock station Andrew liked. I stared out the window, the city lights blurring past, my mind replaying Vince's words, his look. It wasn't about him, not really. It was about what he represented, a crack in the life I'd built, a reminder of how easily things could shift. Andrew turned down the music, his hands steady on the wheel. "You okay?" he asked, his voice cutting through the hum of the engine. "You've been quiet." "Yeah, just tired," I said, glancing at him. His profile was sharp against the glow of the dashboard, and for a second, I wanted to tell him everything. About Vince's comments, about D. Jared's envelope, about the layoff still sitting heavy in my chest. But then he spoke again, and the moment slipped away. "Was it weird, seeing Vince there?" he asked, his tone too even, like he'd been holding the question all night. My heart stuttered. "Weird how?" I said, buying time. He shrugged, eyes on the road. "I don't know. Just, you guys talked a lot at that yacht thing, and tonight he kept looking at you." A pause, then quieter. "Is there something going on?" The question hung there, simple but loaded, like a stone dropped into still water. I could have said no and left it at that. I could have told him about the yacht, about how Vince's attention had felt wrong but fleeting, about how I'd shut it down. I could have even told him about D. Jared, the kiss, the note, laid it all bare and let the chips fall. But I didn't. "No," I said, my voice steady, the lie slipping out before I could stop it. "There's nothing." He nodded, but his jaw tightened, just for a second, before he turned the radio back up. The music filled the car, but it didn't drown out the silence between us. I stared at my hands, folded in my lap, and felt the weight of that single word settle in my chest. It wasn't a lie because I was hiding something. It was a lie because I didn't know how to tell him the truth. Not about Vince, not about D. Jared, not about the part of me that was slipping away. From him, piece by piece. When we got home, Andrew went straight to bed, citing an early meeting. I stayed up, sitting on the couch with the TV off, the house too quiet. Vince's smirk, Andrew's question, my own lie. They circled in my head, each one a thread in a knot I didn't know how to untangle. I'd said no to protect something, but I wasn't sure what. My marriage? My sanity? Or maybe just the version of myself I was still trying to hold on to. The house felt too big without Liv's duffel bag by the door, or her laugh cutting through the morning quiet. She'd left for Seattle a week ago, chasing a fresh start after her breakup. Her texts came sporadically now, usually late at night, full of emojis and quick updates about her new apartment, her job hunt, the coffee shop she'd found with the best oat milk latte ever. I'd reply with a thumbs up or a heart, but the distance between us wasn't just miles. It was the gap between her new life and the one I was still stuck in. I was on the couch, scrolling through her latest message, a photo of her in a thrift store, jacket, grinning in front of a foggy Puget Sound when I started typing. Miss you. Things are weird. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the send button. Weird didn't cover it. The layoff, Vince's lingering looks, D. Jared's envelope, Andrew's question in the car, they were all pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. But Liv was the one person I could tell, even if she was 1,000 miles away. I hit send. Her reply came fast. Weird how? Spill. I smiled, picturing her sprawled on some mismatched couch, phone in hand, ready to dissect my life like it was one of her true crime podcasts. I started typing, then stopped. Where did I even begin? Instead, I called her. Yo, you okay? She answered, her voice warm but edged with worry. I heard dishes clinking in the background like she was mid-dinner. Yeah. No, I don't know, I said, curling my legs under me. The living room was dark except for a lamp in the corner, casting long shadows on the walls. It's just, everything's off. Andrew asked me if I was seeing someone. I said no, but it felt like lying, even, though it's not like that. Liv made a low hum like she was thinking. Okay, back up. Why'd he ask? What's going on? I told her about the birthday dinner, Vince's not-so-subtle comments, the way Andrew had watched us in the car. I didn't mention D. Jared. Not yet. That felt too big, too raw, even for her. It's not like I'm doing anything, I said. But I feel guilty, like I'm betraying him just by existing. She was quiet for a second, the clinking gone. You're not betraying him by existing, she said finally. But you're also not being straight with yourself. If Andrew's picking up on something, it's not just about Vince. It's about you. You're carrying something, and it's showing. I leaned my head back, staring at the ceiling. You sound like a therapist. Good. You need one, she shot back, but there was a smile in her voice. Look, I've been where you are. You think you've got it all under control, like you can just keep going and nothing will break, but then you're just drifting. And you don't even realize it until you're too far from shore. Her words hit harder than I expected, like she'd seen right through the fog in my head. So what do? I asked, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. I don't even know what I want. That's the problem, she said. You've got to figure that out. Not what Andrew wants, or what Vince is fishing for, or even what I think. You. What do you want? And don't say I don't know, because that's a cop-out. I laughed despite myself. You're brutal. Somebody's gotta be, she said. I'm not there to drag you out for coffee and make you talk, so this is me kicking your ass long distance. We talked for a while longer, about her new job at a nonprofit, the guy she'd met at a bar who wasn't her type but kinda cute, the way Seattle rain made her miss sunny days. I told her about the job applications I'd sent out, the interviews that hadn't panned out. But the real stuff, the D. Jared stuff, stayed locked in my chest. I wasn't ready to let it out, not even to her. When we hung up, the house was quieter than before, like her voice had been holding it together. I looked at Liv's photo again, her grin bright against the gray sky. Main thing is, don't forget who you are, she'd texted after our call, like she knew I needed the reminder. I set my phone down and walked to the kitchen, where the cardboard box from my office still sat, untouched. I'd been avoiding it, like unpacking it would make the layoff real. But tonight, I opened it, pulling out a framed photo of me and Andrew from our trip to Napa, a mug with a cheesy company logo, a notebook full of meeting notes. At the bottom was a sticky note I hadn't noticed before, from a coworker. "You've got this." I stared at it, something tightening in my throat. Liv was right. I was drifting, caught between who I'd been and who I was becoming. The sticky note, the photo, her words, they were lifelines, small but real. I didn't have answers. Not yet, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I might be able to find them, if I could just remember who I was. It was a Thursday night, the kind of ordinary evening where nothing should go wrong. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, the radio humming some pop song I barely noticed. Andrew was in the living room, his laptop open, papers scattered on the coffee table. We'd been moving around each other like this for weeks, polite, functional, but not really there. The air felt fragile, like a glass balanced too close to the edge. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text notification lighting up the screen. I glanced at it, expecting Liv or a job rejection. It was D. Jared. "Thinking of you. Hope you're okay." The words were simple, warm, but they landed like a spark in dry grass. I froze, knife in hand, my pulse ticking up. I hadn't heard from him since the coffee shop, hadn't responded to his last message. I should have deleted it, turned the phone over, anything. But I didn't. Andrew's voice came from the doorway, quiet but sharp. "Who's that?" I turned, the knife clattering onto the cutting board. He was standing there, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on my phone. Not angry. Not yet. Just watching, like he already knew something I hadn't said. "Just a friend," I said, too quick, my voice thinner than I wanted. He stepped closer, his gaze flicking to the screen. The message was still there, glowing in the dim kitchen light. He didn't touch the phone, didn't need to. "D. Jared," he said, not a question. "You've been talking to him a lot lately." My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. "It's not like that," I said. "He's just checking in, after the layoff." Andrew nodded, slow, like he was turning the words over in his head. "Checking in," he repeated, his voice flat. "That's what that was at the coffee shop too, right? Just checking in." I opened my mouth to argue, but the truth caught in my throat. He'd seen something, maybe not the whole picture, but enough. The kiss in Austin, the envelope in Arizona, the note I still hadn't thrown out. They weren't in that text, but they were in me, in the way I'd been pulling away, and Andrew knew it. "I'm not doing this," he said, his voice low, controlled. He grabbed his keys from the counter, his jacket from the chair. "I need some air." "Andrew, wait." I started, but he was already moving, the front door, clicking shut behind him. No slam, no shouting, just the quiet sound of him leaving. I stood there, the knife still on the cutting board, the half-chopped carrots forgotten. The house felt hollow, like it was holding its breath. I sank into a chair, my phone still glowing with D. Jared's message. I didn't reply. I didn't know what I'd say, or if it even mattered. The text wasn't a confession, wasn't proof of anything. but it was enough to crack the fragile thing we'd been pretending to hold together. I'd lied in the car, said there was nothing, but this wasn't nothing. It was a fault line, and it had finally split. I waited for him to come back, the minutes stretching into hours. The stir-fry sat unfinished, the radio looping through ads. I thought about calling Liv, but what would I say? That I'd ruined everything? That I didn't even know what I wanted, but I'd lost it anyway. Instead, I sat there replaying the moment Andrew saw the text, the way his face had closed off, not with anger, but with something worse, resignation. He didn't come home that night. I stayed up, the couch my only company, the TV off, the silence louder than any fight. I kept checking my phone, not for D. Jared, but for Andrew, hoping for a text, a call, anything. Nothing came. By dawn, my eyes were gritty, my chest heavy with the weight of what I'd done, not just the text, but every choice that had led to it. The pendant on the dresser, the note in the jewelry box, the door I hadn't opened in Arizona, they were all part of this, and I couldn't pretend they weren't. When the sun came up, I made coffee, the routine grounding me even as the house felt foreign. Andrew's absence was a presence, filling every corner. I didn't know where he'd gone, or if he'd come back. All I knew was that something had changed, not with a scream or a slammed door, but with a quiet exit and a text I couldn't undo. The life I'd been holding onto was gone, and I was the one who'd let it slip away. Andrew didn't come back the next day, or the day after. By the third day, I got a text. Staying at Tom's for a bit. Need space. No anger, no questions, just 5 words that carved a hole in the house. I read it standing in the kitchen, the coffee pot still warm from breakfast, and felt the ground shift under me. Not a collapse, not yet. Just a quiet realignment, like the world had tilted a few degrees. The house was too still without him. No clatter of his keys on the counter, no hum of his work calls leaking from the living room. I moved through it like a guest, opening cabinets, flipping light switches, as if I could convince myself I belonged here. The pendant sat untouched on the dresser, the jewelry box closed. D. Jared's note still inside like a secret I'd forgotten how to confess. I hadn't heard from him since that text, and I didn't reach out. Whatever thread had tied us was fraying, and I wasn't sure I wanted to pull it tighter. I spent hours wandering the rooms, trailing my fingers along the walls, the bookshelves, the couch where we'd watched bad movies and argued over pizza toppings. The living room smelled faintly of Andrew's cologne, a ghost of routine that made my chest ache. I stood by the window watching the street, kids on bikes, a neighbor walking her dog, like I was waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. No one knocked. No one called. I tried to fill the silence. I played music, loud pop stuff that usually got me moving, but it felt hollow, like shouting into a void. I opened my laptop, scrolled job boards, sent out a few applications, but my heart wasn't in it. The layoff had taken my rhythm, and Andrew's absence had taken the rest. I wasn't sure who I was without them, without the job, the marriage, the version of myself I'd been trying to hold on to. One night, I pulled out the cardboard box from my office, the one I'd ignored for weeks. I spread its contents on the dining table, the framed photo from Napa, the mug with the company logo, the sticky note that said, "You've got this." I held the photo, my thumb brushing over Andrew's smile, his arm around me in front of a vineyard. We looked happy, like people who knew where they were going. I set it down, not ready to decide what it meant. Liv texted, checking in. "You holding up?" I typed back, trying, and left it at that. I couldn't explain this. Not the emptiness, not the way I was both relieved and terrified by Andrew's absence. It wasn't just about D. Jared's text or the lie I'd told in the car. It was about all the moments I'd let slide, all the truths I'd dodged, until I was standing in a house that felt like someone else's. I started small routines to anchor myself. Coffee at 7, a walk at noon, job applications in the afternoon. I cleaned the fridge, organized the pantry, tasks that felt like proof I could still function. But at night, when the house went quiet, the weight came back. I'd sit on the couch, staring at the dark TV, wondering where Andrew was, what he was thinking. Was he angry? Hurt? Or had he just given up? I didn't call him. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry felt too small. I don't know what I want too cruel. So I let the silence stretch, a new kind of order settling in. No expectations, no explanations, just me, the house, and the space where our life used to be. One morning, I found myself at the window again, watching the street wake up. A delivery truck rumbled by. A jogger passed with earbuds in. The world kept moving, and I was still here, not quite part of it. I thought about Liv's words. Don't forget who you are. But who was that? The woman in the Napa photo? The one who'd kept D. Jared's note? Or someone I hadn't met yet? I turned away from the window, the light catching the pendant on the dresser across the room. It gleamed, a small, stubborn reminder of what Andrew had tried to give me. I didn't pick it up, but I didn't hide it either. For now, it was enough to let it sit there, part of the new order, quiet, uncertain, and entirely my own. 3 months passed like a slow exhale. The house stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones. Andrew was gone for good now. His things cleared out while I was at a job interview, a note left on the counter. I'll handle the lease. Take care. No fight, no tears, just a clean break that felt anything but. I walked the rooms after, touching the spaces where his books used to be, the closet half empty now. It wasn't loss, not exactly. It was absence, a hollowness I couldn't name. I was alone. Not just single, but unmoored, like a boat cut loose in open water. D. Jared hadn't texted again, and I didn't reach out. Whatever we'd been, memory, temptation, or something else, had dissolved, leaving only a faint ache, like a bruise you forget until you press it. Liv called sometimes, her voice bright with Seattle stories, but even she felt far away, part of a life I wasn't living. Job hunting was a grind. I sent resumes, went to interviews, smiled through questions about my career goals. A few offers came, temp gigs mostly, but I took one at a small marketing firm, enough to pay the bills. The work was fine, emails, spreadsheets, meetings, but it didn't fill the space inside me. I'd come home, drop my keys on the counter, and feel the silence rush in, louder than any noise. Sometimes I'd put on the pendant Andrew gave me. Not every day, just when I needed something to hold on to. It hung light against my chest, the sapphire catching the light like a tiny piece of sky. I didn't wear it for him or for what we'd been. I wore it for me, a reminder that I'd been loved, even if I hadn't known how to keep it. The jewelry box stayed closed, D. Jared's note untouched. I didn't need to read it anymore. I knew what it said and what it couldn't change. One night I sat on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, the TV off. My phone was dark, no notifications, no one waiting for me to check in. I thought about that moment in the car when Andrew asked if there was someone else, and I'd said no. I'd meant it in a way. There was no one, not really. But the lie wasn't about D. Jared or Vince. It was about me, about the part of myself I'd been hiding, too scared to face. I'd said no because I didn't know how to say I'm not sure who I am anymore. Now, alone in the half-lit living room, I saw it clearly. Everything that happened, the kiss, the envelope, the text, the silence, wasn't a mistake. It was my life, messy and real, not a story I could rewrite. I'd spent so long chasing the version of myself I thought I should be. Wife, professional, friend, that I'd lost the one who was actually here, sitting with a cheap Merlot and a heart full of questions. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The emptiness wasn't despair. It was space, room to breathe, to figure out what came next. I'd been running from it, filling my days with applications and routines. But now I let it settle, let it be. I wasn't okay, not yet, but I was here, and that was enough. The next morning, I woke early, the sky still gray. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Not to job hunt, but to write. Nothing big. Just a few lines about the desert in Arizona, the way the light hit the motel sign, the weight of an envelope I didn't open. It wasn't a story, not yet, but it was a start, a way to map the pieces of myself I'd been ignoring. Liv texted later that day. "You good?" I replied, getting there, and meant it. I didn't know what I wanted. Not a new job, not a new love, not even a new city. But I knew I wanted to find out, to stop drifting and start choosing, even if the choices scared me. I stood by the window, coffee mug warm in my hands, watching the street wake up. A jogger passed, a car pulled out of a driveway. The world was still there, and I was still in it, not whole but not broken either. The pendant hung around my neck, the note stayed in its box, and I let them both be. Parts of a past that had shaped me, but didn't own me. This was my reality, not the one I'd planned, but the one I was living. And for the first time in months, I didn't want to run from it.